They stabbed her in the back during a real drill. Left her bleeding in the dirt, GPS ripped off, communications down, assumed dead, and still, 2 days later, she walked back into base. Silent, upright, no accusations, no shouting, just one goal, correction. Because what they didn't know, what they never even considered, was that Navy SEALs don't need a weapon to make betrayal pay in full. Now, before we tell you the full story, make sure you're subscribed with the bell icon turned on. Then drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Because today, you are about to see exactly what happens when a Navy SEAL comes back from the dead.
My orders
the wind came up
precisely.
early at Black Dune.
There is nothing
dry
further to
and
discuss.
sharp, cutting across the flats like a blade looking for skin. It whipped the edges of canvas tents and kicked dust along the ridgelines, still scarred black from last month's live fire rotations. The sun hadn't broken yet, just a bruised orange line where sky met sand, but the heat already sat in the ground like something waiting. Lieutenant Commander Arden Kessler stood near the staging racks, gloved hands resting light on a supply crate, desert fatigues, elbows squared. She didn't fidget, didn't adjust her webbing, didn't scan the horizon like the others did, just watched the light shift and waited for the call. Unit Bravo 6, loadout confirmed. 3 Marines moved past her, Sergeant Kane first, broad through the shoulders, mirrored sunglasses, even in half dark, rifle slung casual like it was part of his arm. Corporal Laird behind him, chewing a protein bar like the world was background noise. Private Vaughn last, silent, barely 2 years out of boot. They nodded at her, just enough for protocol. Kane offered a tight smile that never reached his eyes. Hope the SEALs remember which side they're on this time. Arden didn't respond, didn't even look at him, just lifted her pack, recon standard, medkit, comms node, and secured the last strap. That silence unnerved them more than anything she could have said. They met near the rally stake where a red cloth snapped once in the wind and went limp. A low-rank evaluator checked boxes on a clipboard, then stepped aside. The 4 of them stood shoulder to shoulder, backs to base, eyes east. Beyond lay the outer zone, mock hostiles, signal jammers, irregular ground, sand pits and false perimeters seeded with buried flares. No real danger, but real enough to prove something. Kane clicked his radio. Bravo 6, comms check. Laird, good. Vaughn, good. Kessler's voice came last, low and even. 6 Alpha, green light. They moved. The terrain shifted fast. Low ridges, dry channels, narrow blind spots carved between rock teeth. They advanced in staggered diamond, Arden leading, her movements exact. Her footsteps found firm soil even where the sand broke thin. When she raised a hand to signal halt, the others stopped half a step late. Somewhere in the distance, a dummy mortar sounded, hollow thud against the hills. Simulated contact 600 meters north. Laird muttered. Kane smirked. Let's hope the princess up front knows which way to run. Arden gave no sign she'd heard. She adjusted the focus on her monocular and dropped low, checking for beam sensors buried in the dust. She motioned left, then right. Silent. They followed, but slower than they should have. Deliberate lag. The sand thickened ahead. Haze pulled across the flats like fog without moisture. Visibility dropped to a few hundred feet. Nothing moved. Vaughn whispered, half joking. Feels like ghost ground, Kane replied louder. Then let's hope the ghost knows where she's going. She did, she always did, but even ghosts have to watch their backs. They dropped into the ravine single file, boots digging into sand-slick stone, the incline too steep for conversation. Kane went first this time, said it was a terrain call. Arden didn't argue. Let him lead. Her eyes tracked the edges instead, debris patterns. The odd glint of glass from old smoke canisters half buried near the base. She counted 6, too many for a training route this far out. At the bottom, shadows pooled thick. The ravine floor curved east through a canyon throat of rock, narrowing to single file. Arden raised a fist. The column stopped. She tilted her chin upward. Signal flare residue smeared the rocks. Residue from last week's SEAL rotation. They weren't the first team to use this trail. She tapped her radio. Bravo 6, visual confirmation on route Echo 7. Advancing to breach perimeter. Static hissed back. Kane's voice crackled through faint. Say again? You're cutting? Then silence. She adjusted her set. Nothing. Vaughn tried his. Comms distortion, he said. Could be the terrain. Could be. Or something else. Arden motioned forward. They climbed the far side slow, using shoulder grips and boot wedges. At the crest, the desert stretched bare again. Flat scrubland. Then a fence simulation zone ahead. In its center sat the derelict metal outpost. 3 walls standing. One corner collapsed inward. Rusted steel reflecting sharp morning light. Their objective. Sensitive beacons inside, Arden said. Retrieve, extract, no deviation. Clear? Kane nodded without looking at her. Copy. They advanced low across open ground. No cover, just heat mirage and crunching gravel. Laird flanked right, Vaughn close left. Kane walked center but never stopped glancing behind Arden. Like watching her back wasn't just about protection. The first flashbang popped behind a mound 60 yards out. Harmless, loud. Timed from a buried pressure plate, part of the drill. Arden's eyes snapped to Vaughn. He'd veered too close to a line of disturbed earth. Stop, she said, lunging forward. Too late. A second flash. Closer this time. Air pulse only. Vaughn staggered, lost his footing. She caught him before he hit the ground. You okay? He blinked hard, nodded, breathing shallow. Didn't see it. Now you do, she said, helping him upright. Her tone held no judgment, just data. Behind them, Kane called out. Didn't know SEAL training included babysitting. Laird laughed under his breath. Arden didn't turn around, just motioned toward the outpost. They reached the perimeter wall without further incident. The structure had been hit before, clearly part of a prior drill scenario. Metal torn at the seams, shadows inside deep and angular. Arden gave a tight signal. 2 fingers split entry. Vaughn and Laird peeled left and right. Kane fell in behind her. She stepped through the threshold. Inside, it was cooler. The dust hung thick. A single steel crate sat in the corner, blinking faint green. She lowered to one knee, scanning it with her wrist console. Beacon live. No tamper flag. The mission was almost complete. Behind her, the air shifted. A glance over her shoulder would have said too much. Would have changed the timing. She didn't give them the satisfaction. She just kept scanning. Kane's voice came low, too soft for protocol, too rehearsed. On her mark. Then the sound of a blade leaving its sheath. The air inside felt stale, like it hadn't been touched in years. Dust motes hung where the sunlight sliced through a bullet hole in the wall, drifting in thin spirals. Arden kept her focus on the beacon readout, its pulse steady, low frequency green. 1 signal, 1 extraction, standard. Behind her, boots shifted against the grit. She registered it but didn't look up. Kane's breathing changed, a shallow rhythm, tight in the throat. Her hand hovered near the sidearm clipped to her thigh, not to draw it, just to know it was there. Target's clear, Kane muttered. The words were wrong, not radio protocol, not even situational. The sound of the knife came first, a faint metallic whisper cutting through the static hum of the console. Then a force like a hammer drove into her upper back, deep, precise, between the plates of her vest, just below the seam. She gasped, not from fear, but from the shock of how clean it was. Her chest hit the floor hard. Dust exploded upward in a silent bloom. Vaughn's voice broke the quiet. You didn't... She had it coming, Kane said, pulling the blade free. His voice was low, calm. No one outranks loyalty. Laird crouched, eyes darting. Man, she's still breathing. Kane glared at him. Not for long. Arden's vision blurred. Pain radiated sharp, searing through her ribs, but her mind stayed methodical. Her pulse, she counted it. Her breath, shallow but steady. Her hand, still near the sidearm. She could draw. She didn't. Vaughn hesitated, sweat breaking through his temple. This isn't right, Sergeant. She's command... Kane's response came in a hiss. You want to end your career for her? They'll believe my word over yours. You follow orders, Marine. The silence that followed was worse than the knife. He yanked her GPS tag off her vest and tossed it toward the trench outside. She got separated in the breach. That's the report. Copy? Laird and Vaughn both nodded. Neither spoke. Kane crouched again, wiping the handle clean against the hem of his sleeve. Then he looked down at her, the grin small and satisfied. Seal or not, you forgot the first rule out here. You turn your back on the wrong man. You don't turn back at all. He stood, motioned them out. The three disappeared through the doorway. Their boots faded into distance, swallowed by the wind. Arden stayed where she'd fallen, one arm bent beneath her, one eye half open. The warmth spreading under her vest wasn't fear, it was blood and information, the depth of the wound, the direction of the blade, the speed of the strike. She cataloged every detail. Outside, sand began to slide back over their footprints. The wind erased what had happened almost instantly. Almost. She reached out, fingers dragging toward the crate. The beacon's faint light pulsed against her knuckles like a heartbeat refusing to quit. Her vision dimmed, but she was still conscious, still calculating. She whispered through the blood in her mouth, voice flat and clear. Copy that, Sergeant. Then she closed her eyes. Not to sleep, but to wait. The first thing that hit her was the cold, not the stabbing wound, not even the ache in her spine, just that sudden drop in temperature as the desert switched from day to night like a trapdoor slamming shut. The heat she'd cursed hours earlier bled away into nothing. Every breath that left her mouth came out like smoke. She rolled onto her side. Pain shot through her shoulder blade, sharp enough to blur her vision, but she didn't scream. Screaming wasted air. Her hand fumbled across the dirt until she found her medkit still clipped to her thigh. Her gloves were slick when she unzipped it. She tore gauze free, pressed it hard against the wound, and counted seconds instead of breaths. Air first, blood second, distance last. That was the rule. That was the discipline that kept you alive when nobody else was coming. She drew in a slow breath, locked her jaw, and started moving. One arm, one knee, drag, breathe, count. The desert didn't make it easy. Sand filled the cut in her uniform, clung to the blood, burned like salt. Her teeth chattered from cold and shock. The stars above her looked close enough to touch, mocking her with how calm they were. Half a mile, maybe more, the ground began to slope upward toward the ridge. Somewhere beyond that ridge sat the beacon zone, her original objective. She remembered the layout from the briefing, replaying it like a mental map. At the ridge line, she found the first hint of man-made debris, a half-buried crate, edges scorched from an old exercise burn. She clawed toward it, pried it open with her knife, found what was left inside, a fractured ration pack, a coiled saline pouch, and a flare gun. No signal rounds, just red fire. It would do. She bit down on a strip of torn cloth, braced the barrel against a rock, and used the flare's heat to cauterize the wound. The smell hit her first. Iron, smoke, sweat. Her vision went black at the edges. She stayed conscious by counting backwards from 60. When the last number fell silent, she spat the cloth out and lay still, chest rising shallow but steady. Above, the faint thump of rotor blades rolled through the air. Extraction chopper, the same one she was supposed to board. She tilted her head just enough to see its lights trace across the horizon, fading east. No one called her name over the radio. No one even checked the channel. The quiet came back heavier than before. She reached for the compass tied to her wrist. The glass was cracked, but the needle still turned. She lined it to north, steadied her breathing, and began crawling again, slow, deliberate, efficient. Every inch she moved erased another piece of what they thought they'd buried. When the ridge finally broke open to a flat basin of dark sand, she stopped long enough to whisper once. Voice rasped, thinned by grit and blood. They think I'm dead. Her eyes narrowed, a thin gleam under the desert moon. Good. The gates at Forward Base Echo clanked open just after 0700. The sun was already up, painting long shadows between the stacked container walls, casting harsh glare off the Humvees lined in silent rows. Most of the camp was awake, stretching through their morning routines. Chow, gear checks, half-hearted jokes passed over coffee mugs that steamed in the cold. By the tarmac, Kane stood with his hands on his hips, squinting toward the rising heat shimmer. Laird lounged against a comms crate, still chewing the edge of a protein wrapper. Vaughn sat nearby, silent, helmet resting at his side. "Guess Command bought it," Kane muttered. No questions, no scramble. They think she's still out there, or... He let the rest hang in the air like exhaust. Vaughn shifted. We shouldn't have. Kane's look cut him off. Flat, unspoken, final. We followed the plan. She got lost. End of story. Across the compound, Commander Holt stepped out from the main tent, trailed by an aide. He walked straight toward them, holding a clipboard under one arm. Sergeant Kane, Holt said. Briefing room, now. Kane nodded and motioned to the others. Same story. Don't improvise. They followed Holt without a word, boots crunching in perfect rhythm, but they weren't halfway across the lot when the sound of tires on gravel stopped them cold. A medic transport rolled through the rear gate, unmarked, matte gray, low profile. It wasn't supposed to be there. Kane turned, frowning. The vehicle pulled up near the intake bay. One door opened, and Arden Kessler stepped out. She wasn't carried. She wasn't escorted. She stood under her own weight, arm in a soft sling, uniform stripped of outer gear but still bearing the rank insignia clear on her collar. Dried blood marked the edge of her undershirt. Her face was pale, but steady. Her eyes didn't wander. She walked across the gravel without a limp, without drama. Each step even, calculated. When she passed Kane's line of sight, he blinked once. The corners of his mouth twitched, but no words came. She didn't look at him, not once, didn't flinch, didn't speak. She just moved, straight into the main tent. Inside, a radio operator turned toward the aide beside her and whispered, "She's alive?" The aide nodded slowly, eyes wide. Walked in like she never left. Outside, Kane's smirk had vanished. Laird looked like he'd swallowed sand. And Vaughn, he didn't meet anyone's eyes. He just sat down on the edge of the crate and stared at the dirt between his boots. Because no one had expected her to come back. And certainly not like this. Quiet, upright, whole enough to be undeniable. She hadn't just survived. She'd chosen the moment to return. Inside the command tent, the lights buzzed softly. Too bright for the early hour. Too cold for the desert just outside. The air was still, interrupted only by the distant thump of base activity and the faint scratch of a pen moving across paper. Lieutenant Commander Arden Kessler sat in front of a folding table, her slinged arm resting lightly across her lap. No blood now, no mud, just the slow, even breathing of someone who'd long since burned through the adrenaline and settled into something colder, something sharper. Across from her, Commander Holt read the incident report aloud. His tone was neutral, clipped. Comms interference during Phase 2 of the recon drill. Unit separated during approach. You proceeded alone to the beacon site? Arden nodded once. Correct. No confirmation on the rest of the team's movement? They did not respond to radio calls after the breach line. I continued per protocol. Holt studied her. The wound? Shrapnel from a flare trap. Self-treated with onboard medkit and thermal cauterization. She didn't blink. I did not file a casualty report because I did not consider myself a casualty. One of the junior officers raised an eyebrow. Holt didn't smile, but the corners of his mouth flattened like he wanted to. And how did you navigate back without GPS? Compass, visual terrain markers, prior knowledge of layout from orientation brief. Silence stretched for a beat. Holt leaned back slightly in his chair. No accusations, Lieutenant? None to file. You're not making this easy. Her tone was even. Nothing about this has been easy. Later, in the med bay, Petty Officer Torres checked her dressings. His hands were steady, but his expression wasn't. He glanced toward the sealed tent flap before speaking. They stabbed you. She didn't look up. They left me. Same thing. She peeled the gauze back gently, revealing the angry burn line from where she'd cauterized the wound. He whistled low. You're not reporting them? He asked. Not yet. Torres frowned. You're giving them a chance to walk? I'm giving them a chance to out themselves. That's optimistic. No, she said, finally looking at him. That's leverage. Evidence sticks better when it walks into the room by itself. He didn't answer right away, just nodded and began wrapping her shoulder with new compression mesh. Outside, rumors had already started to move through the barracks. She crawled back with a busted lung, no evac, no contact, still made it in. Didn't name names, didn't ask questions, and that was the part that spread fastest, that she said nothing, not even to clear her name. The silence unnerved them more than any accusation ever could, because when someone refuses to point the finger, you start to wonder what they're waiting for. The desert had turned quiet again. Late evening at Black Dune brought a different kind of stillness. No wind, no drills, just the slow stretch of sky, darkening into muted navy, while the base lights clicked on one by one. In the simulation's staging bay, Arden stood alone beside a folding table, sliding her gloves on with deliberate tension. Her uniform was the same as before, desert fatigues, boots cleaned but not polished, no medals, no flair, just the regulation form of someone who'd been through something and chose not to broadcast it. On the far end of the hangar, Torres leaned against a supply crate, arms crossed. He watched her assemble the training logs, then stepped forward. "You sure you want to lead this one?" Arden didn't glance up. "I requested the assignment. Command gave it fast." She looked at him now, steady, because they already knew the outcome. He nodded slowly. "You going to confront him?" "No." She tightened the strap on her plate carrier. "Not confront. Then what?" "Correct." Torres didn't push further. He just stepped back, unzipped his field tablet, and pulled up the roster. Kane's name was there. So were Laird's and Vaughn's. By 0600 the next morning, the drill was posted. No announcement, no wide email, just a sheet tacked to the board with the title Joint Breach Reevaluation Exercise, Unit Bravo 6. A recertification test, routine. But everyone saw it, and everyone knew. At 0700, the teams assembled at the south end of the breach zone. The terrain had been reset, flat sand, mock enemy bunkers, low cover walls. A few SEAL instructors stood near the outpost, clipboards in hand. No one said a word. Kane stood at the edge of the field with Laird and Vaughn flanking him. He bounced slightly on the balls of his feet, jaw tight, chest forward. The confidence looked rehearsed now, thinner than before. Across from them, Arden walked out from the tent. No one announced her. She didn't need it. She moved with the same calm silence that unnerved everyone more than shouting ever could. She stepped to the front of the field and addressed the group without raising her voice. "This is a standard close-quarters breach drill. Each pair will rotate through the mock facility. No weapons, contact-only engagement. Control, not force." Her eyes met Kane's. "You'll begin the first round." He didn't respond, just stepped forward, a smirk tugging half-heartedly at one corner of his mouth. "You sure you want me to go first?" he asked. "I'm sure," she said. Behind them, a few younger Marines had gathered near the observation tent, not officially part of the drill, just present, watching, the way people do when they know something's coming. Torres stood at the perimeter, hands tucked behind his back. One of the SEAL instructors beside him leaned over and whispered, "You think she's going to embarrass him?" Torres shook his head. "No. She's going to remind him." And with that, Arden Kessler stepped onto the mat, not to fight, not to retaliate, just to correct what should never have been forgotten. The breach mat had been cleared to regulation spec. 40 by 20 feet, dusted clean, hazard lines freshly taped. The floor looked more like a surgical prep zone than a combat drill space. It was intentional, so that whatever happened next would be seen without excuse. No mud, no shadows, no chaos, just clarity. Kane stepped onto the mat first, rolling his shoulders as if limbering up for a sparring match. His jaw was set in that cocky, half-challenged look that had carried him through a dozen field exercises unchallenged. But his eyes flicked. They moved too much, toward the instructors, toward the small but growing group of Marines hovering just beyond the hazard tape, toward Arden. She walked onto the mat exactly as she had stepped onto the base 2 days earlier, measured, unreadable, spine straight, collar squared. Commander Holt stood off to the side with his arms folded. He gave one nod. Standard engagement, no strikes, no takedowns beyond rotation control. Arden's response was even. "Understood." Kane didn't speak. He just bounced once in place, then took position. He moved with a kind of lazy confidence. Arms loose, knees flexed, posture wide, performative. Begin, Holt said. Kane circled her like he had on the first day in the ravine. Wide orbit, feet a little too loud. It was all theater. Arden didn't move. She didn't even shift her weight. Her hands stayed relaxed at her sides. Elbows slightly bent. Not a stance, just stillness. Sure you're ready for this? Kane called out. I'd hate to send you crawling again. No answer. The silence began to stretch. Kane made the first real move, stepping in fast with a reach for her shoulder, just enough to force her to react, but she didn't. She let his hand come close, then pivoted slightly out of range, not dodging, just re-angling. That slight shift made his arm overextend. It was enough. She caught his wrist mid-air. Her other hand snapped up and locked his elbow, and in one clean, fluid rotation, she torqued him off balance. His boots lifted. His back hit the mat with a slap, and she didn't stop there. She dropped one knee, lightly, precisely, onto his sternum, enough to pin, not enough to injure. Her grip on his wrist turned down and in, forcing his shoulder flat. The entire maneuver had taken less than 3 seconds. The room fell silent. Kane's breath came in short bursts now, not from pain. He wasn't hurt, but from disbelief. He was locked down by someone half his size and saying nothing. Arden leaned down just slightly, voice low enough for only him to hear, but clear enough for the nearby mic to catch. Lesson 1, she said. You don't need eyes in the back of your head when you remember who was behind you. She released the hold and stood, adjusted her collar with one hand, walked back toward the edge of the mat. Kane stayed down longer than he needed to. When he finally sat up, he didn't speak. His eyes flicked once toward Holt, then toward the Marine still watching in stunned silence. No one clapped. No one cheered. It wasn't a victory. It was a correction. And nothing needed to be said after that. The meeting room at Command HQ didn't have much space for protest. No windows, no small talk. Just a long steel table, 6 folding chairs, and a screen already queued with footage no one wanted to watch again. Sergeant Kane sat rigid in his seat, jaw clenched. Corporal Laird sat beside him, arms folded, the defiance drained from his face. Vaughn, last in the row, couldn't even lift his eyes off the floor. The only movement in him was his fingers, tapping, fidgeting, betraying guilt that words hadn't yet. Commander Holt entered quietly, carrying a slim tablet, no preamble, no pageantry. He tapped the screen, a video filled the display. Helmet cam feed, Vaughn's. There it was, grainy, unedited, time-stamped. Arden crouched near the beacon, Kane approaching behind her. Then the shove, the flash of steel, her body hitting the dirt. Vaughn's shaky whisper, "You didn't?" Holt paused the video mid-frame. "This footage was submitted to the Oversight Board anonymously," he said. "But the metadata traces back to your team. So I'll ask once." He looked at Vaughn. "Did you film this?" Vaughn swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." "Did you know what was about to happen?" "No, not like that. I thought—" He stopped. There was no way to dress it. Kane turned toward him, voice sharp. "You're gonna fold on me now?" Laird shifted in his seat, jaw tight. "We're already folded." Holt let the words hang, then turned back to Kane. "Sergeant, this footage shows the assault of a superior officer during a live training operation. There was no simulation trigger, no emergency escalation, just betrayal." Kane stayed silent. "You are hereby relieved of your rank and suspended from all joint training assignments. A formal Article 32 hearing is scheduled pending final command review." He turned to Laird. "Your role as an accessory and your silence following the incident warrant administrative discharge proceedings, effective immediately." Then Holt looked to Vaughn. "You've come forward, late, but you did. Your record will reflect cooperation, but your commission path ends here." Vaughn nodded slowly, eyes still locked to the floor. He didn't argue. Holt closed the tablet. "Dismissed." None of them spoke. Chairs scraped back. Boots scuffed the concrete. Outside the building, the sunlight hit harder than before. The same courtyard, same flag flapping against the pole, but something about the posture of everyone walking across it had changed. Stiffer, more deliberate. Arden stood at the far end near the observation rail, hands behind her back, uniform neat, untouched by the weight of what had just happened. Vaughn glanced up when he saw her, then quickly away. Kane paused near her, not close, not near enough to say anything and still keep his dignity, but just long enough for her to notice. She didn't turn, didn't blink. He waited, 1 second, 2, then walked away. Holt approached from behind, stopping beside her. "You're not testifying?" "No need." He nodded once. "Why not?" She spoke without shifting her gaze. "Because betrayal already sentenced them." I just let the truth catch up. The breeze stirred against her sleeve. Same direction as the day she returned. Same smell in the dirt, but this time the ground didn't feel like it was trying to bury anything. It felt like it was remembering. And now, so was everyone else. If someone left you to die in the field, would you have stayed silent, like she did? Or exposed them the first chance you got? And do you think silence can be stronger than revenge when it comes from someone trained to wait? Drop your answers in the comments. We read every single one. Tap like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next mission. And share this video with someone who still thinks betrayal ends in silence. Your next story is already waiting on screen. Go watch it now, and we'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place.